Hey everybody, welcome to the Multifamily Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Peterson. We've got a great show for you today. We have someone that you're going to really need to know and pay attention to because he has a way of keeping you out of the popo. This is Mauricio Rauld. He's been doing law. How long have you been doing law for, Mauricio?
I've been doing this for almost 20 years now.
Oh my gosh, just a little bit, right? Just a little bit.
Right, just a little bit, yeah.
He does securities law, and he is my private placement lawyer. He does a lot more than just that. His job is really to help guide you through the process of syndication. And if you don't have an attorney, or if you're thinking about if you don't have a great one, I highly recommend that you pay attention to this show because we're going to go over a lot of information and really kind of get down into the crux of what it is holistically, and then when do you actually engage someone like Mauricio? So Mauricio, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me back, Corey. Looking forward to it.
Oh, and by the way, did I plug that you do all my PPMs?
I do all your PPMs, and I do a lot more. But yeah, we definitely do all your PPMs.
So that's who I use. So if you don't use Mauricio, you're an idiot. Did I just say that?
I appreciate
That's my shameless plug, brother.
You've always been so kind to me, man. I appreciate it. And, just always trying to add.
There's only one way to give a referral, and give one like you mean it, right? And if you don't mean it, don't have him on your show as a guest.
Love it, man. Love it. Looking forward to. We had great. I think the last time we were on, you had just started the podcast. I think it's episode 10.
It's almost 2 years ago, brother. Yeah. That was like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
we've been going strong, man.
Is this now? Well, I won't put you on the spot. It's many eepisodes later. So looking forward to doing this again, man.
Yeah. So let's talk about what Mauricio does. 50,000 feet. Like, give everybody an idea of what the hell does a lawyer like you do, and you just give some,
Yeah.
Give me the how to, what to.
I keep you out of jail. We were at that event, right, a couple of weeks ago, and we were together at the booth, and we were kind of kidding around that, Corey can show you how to raise all the money, and Mauricio will make sure you stay out of jail. But yeah, so as a reminder, anytime you're raising money from other people, right there, when you have passive investors in your deal, you are selling a security. And people don't really realize that. People are like, why is the SEC even involved? I'm just buying a piece of property. I'm buying real estate. Why the hell is the real estate? I'm sorry, why is the SEC involved? And the reason is their definition of a security is really broad. So it's not just stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all that stuff that we kind of associate as a security, but it includes basically anytime you take money from somebody, where the profits are being generated from your efforts, that's kind of the catch-all. You're dealing with a security. So it can be a joint venture agreement, it can be a TIC agreement, it could be a handshake, a high five. The structure itself doesn't matter. If you have passive investors, essentially you are going to be issuing a security, which is why the Securities and Exchange Commission is involved in the first place. And so my job is primarily to make sure that when you are raising money, you're doing it in full compliance with primarily federal law. This is primarily a federal law issue, which is why I get to do it all over the country and all over the world. Actually, I got a lot of international clients who are raising money for their projects, Nicaragua and Panama and Belize and some Asian countries. And there are still, we can't ignore the states. The states are still there, and we've got to give them a little bit of love. But we basically don't really need to comply with the state securities laws other than, the anti-fraud provisions. I mean, you still can't, if you engage in fraud, if you try and emulate Bernie Madoff, the states are going to get involved. But assuming you're not defrauding people and you're not going crazy, we really focus on the federal level, and that's what I do. I make sure you help you navigate that world, which can get a little complicated. People think it's simple and I just need PPM docs or whatever. And I keep reminding people it's so much more than that. And my job is just to try and make that easier to understand so that you don't get overwhelmed. And really my job is to make sure you get to do what you do best, which is you're the quarterback of the deal, and I'm just one piece, right? I'm the legal piece of your overall syndication puzzle. And I just make sure that piece is as easy as it can be for you, so you can focus on, your underwriting, your due diligence, all the other stuff you got to worry about.
It really is a piece of the puzzle, and I think that's a great way to describe what a real estate deal looks like. It is pieces of the puzzle that you put together, and you get all the right people involved to make a deal come through. But raising money and your syndication attorney is a big piece of the puzzle. And because there's right ways and wrong ways, and Mauricio, I love your thing of practicing safe syndication. I love that concept, and I love that the talk that you do on that. So can we let's go over some of the bullet points of what that is and what that entails.
Yeah, I'll just be, we'll give you the kind of the 50,000 foot overview. Once we figured out and we realized that we're issuing securities, which is what we're doing when we're raising money, then I always say there's three things we worry about. We either need to register that security or register that syndication with the SEC, or we need to find an exemption to registration, or number three, it's illegal. It's that simple, right? And obviously we don't want to engage in any illegal activity. So I usually don't spend too much time on that, but I do want to stress that it's not just all Bernie Madoff stuff. I mean, we kind of joke about that. And obviously hopefully people aren't, out there looking to swindle their investors and defraud them. I mean, that's not what we're talking about. But, if you're not giving them the proper disclosures, if you're kind of getting a little carried away with your returns, I mean, there's things that you can do to make an offer illegal. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about lately, and we can get into it later if you want to, but people are on social media, for example, blasting their deals or conditioning the market and getting people excited, which would violate some of these rules, which would make it illegal. So, but illegal is one of them, right? So we don't want to do anything illegal. We don't want to register a syndication either with the SEC, because that's just and when I say register, I really mean a full-blown registration. That's going to take a couple years. It's going to take.
That's like saying you're going to go public, right?
Yeah,
so people understand what that means. That's like saying when Facebook went IPO'd, that's a full registration.
Right. And it's just going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. And if you're in a contract to buy a building and you've got 90 days to close or whatever, you don't have time to go spend 2 years dealing with the SEC and getting your deal approved. So it's not really applicable for us, especially us real estate investors. So we're kind of left with number two, which is really where I live day to day. And this is all I do. I spend 100% of my time working on syndications, and we focus on the exemptions. And as you know, Corey, luckily there's a couple of exemptions that 90 to 95% of the people use, because there's a couple of reasons why, but they're just great exemptions. And these are the Reg D exemptions that you've probably heard of before, and specifically, and this is as technical as we'll get on today's podcast, the Rule 506B and 506C. B as in boy, C as in Charlie. Those are the two exemptions that most 95%, I would say 90 to 95% of the people use. And the reason we use them, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but the reason they're so popular and people use them is really two reasons. Number one, they're what we call a safe harbor, which means if we comply with all these bullet points, we are assured of complying with the SEC. We don't have any guesswork. It's like you hit these bullet points, you're good, right? So that's always, certainty is always good. And then the other reason is it preempts state law, and preemption is just a fancy way of saying we don't have to worry about the states, as we kind of talked about earlier. Again, anti-fraud provisions, we still got to worry about it, but we don't worry about the states. So think about it. If you did have to worry about the states, or there are some exemptions that are not preempted, then you'd have to hire me as your federal attorney, and then you'd have to go to every single state that you sell into, hire a local securities attorney, and comply with each state securities laws and pay each state securities laws attorney. You're going to end up with like a team of lawyers, and it just gets expensive and complicated. And why deal with that when you've got these great exemptions that preempt all that?
Exactly. It's just going to be a whole bullet mess of money and wasted time, effort, right?
That's right. And so I'll spend 2 minutes on this because I know we wanted to discuss some other stuff, but 506B, which within those two that we talked about, is probably even within those two, I think the last statistic I saw was like 90% of people who use Reg D use 506B over 506C, which is a little surprising. But 506B essentially allows you to raise an unlimited amount of money and allows you to accept up to 35 non-accredited investors, as long as they're sophisticated. But non-accredited investors, meaning if you don't have $1 million in net worth, or excluding your primary residence, then you can invest. Or if you don't make $200,000 a year for the last couple of years, you can invest. So that's appealing to a lot of people, especially when they're starting off. And the big no-no with the 506B, and the biggest limitation, is simply you just can't advertise, right? You can't go out on Facebook, for example, and pitch your deal. You can't go on conferences. You can't go on podcasts. You basically can't advertise, and that's one of the big limitations, which is why now we have 506C, which is the other exemption that some people rely on, and where you can advertise. And that's kind of the beauty of that one. It's basically the same exemption that now allows you to advertise, and the only limitation you really have is you can only accept accredited investors over there. So if you're going to do 506C, knock yourself out, go on Facebook, pitch your deal, go on podcast, do whatever you want. but just know you can only accept accredited investors, and you must take reasonable steps to verify that they are accredited, so you can't just take their word for it.
So here's my take on that, Mauricio. So like I've been, I always, so because every attorney's, like, even, I just hear you say it's like, I don't know why people just don't do 506C. And because in theory it sounds great. I can just advertise for my deal. But the problem is you're chasing the 10% of accredited investors in the country, which is the same 10% everybody else is chasing. And what happens is that money is very sophisticated, right? Now I'm saying this is just my opinion, okay? Because like, so we raise, and you helped me do this, so we'll talk about my structure a little bit. Because I came up with Mauricio and said, hey, listen, Mauricio, I want to do a type of PPM. And here's the great thing about if you have a good attorney, a lot of times you got to ask the right questions. Like, hey, can I do this? Or how can I set this up if I want to do this and this? And so the question I asked Mauricio was, hey, I want to pay a 6% pref, but I don't want to give away the back end. I just want to make it another 6%. And so he's like, okay, well, we can do that. And like, here's how I think we're going to structure it. And so that we figured out a way. So I'm raising capital at 12%, which is fairly, I'm learning in the industry, that's a big wow. It's actually a big wow. Because every time I go to some, they're like, do what? How are you doing that again? No, you can't do that. Like, wait, how much did you raise last year? And when I tell them, we raised like 15 mil, then they're opening their eyes. Oh, well, how are you doing that? Because, and truly, it's, even though most of my investors, I would say 85% of our investors are accredited, Mauricio, right? The way we go about it is totally different, and the conversations that we have are totally different.
Yeah.
And but it's more about education and getting to know your investor more so than it is marketing. And I think that's why most people, at the end of the day, people don't buy a deal because you can throw it on an ad on Facebook. They invest in your deal because they know you, like you, and trust you. Right? And that's the slow game. And so if you're going to go in the slow game, you might, in my opinion, then you should just do a 506B anyways, because it's all about relationship based, right? And having substantive relationships with people, as Mauricio would say.
That's such a great point, because a lot of people, I think, have it backwards. So I want to stress the point you just mentioned. It is a long game, as you put it. A lot of people especially who are getting into this, they tie up a deal and they're like, okay, now I got to go raise the money to go close this thing. And you don't realize that people like you who do this well, you're constantly cultivating your investor list. You're always talking to them. You're always adding value to them. You're always picking up the phone. You're always talking to them, so that when you do have a deal, it's not like the first time they've heard from you, or even know who you are. You've been cultivating, you've been farming for all these years, so that when it is time to go raise money, you have access to capital, as opposed to a lot of people do it backwards, and they go out hunting because it's like they got to close a deal. I got to go raise $1 million. Where do I get it? Oh crap, I can only raise 300 from my list. Let me go, how do I find the other 700? And they freak out. But it's an ongoing process that you have to continually work at, even if you got to
farm it. Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, I think when you don't have a deal, arguably that's when you're more effective, because the person you're talking to doesn't worry about, when's the pitch going to come? When are they going to ask me for money? You just tell them up front, look, I don't have a deal going on right now, so I'm just trying to find out, what do you need? It's all about them, right? Or what kind of returns are you looking for? Are you more interested in equity, debt, tax? Are you looking for tax mitigation? Like, what do you want, so that I can think of you? If I find a deal, I can come to you with that particular deal, or I can, go hunting for a deal that meets your specific needs.
Right. And here's my process, right? So here's my company. Here's what we do good. And I think lots of people, when you start having those conversations, what I find is that the people respond to that way better. It's not hard sell, and it's really all about relationships. So the more you can create relationships in this business, I think the better off you are, regardless. So, all right, so let's keep going. So there's 506C, 506B, and there's a couple more points, I think, to the big picture, right? Or is that it?
Yeah, that's basically. I mean, there's another exemption that people are starting to talk about a little bit more, which is this Reg A plus. But frankly, unless you're doing some kind of a fund, it's a little bit difficult because even though it doesn't take as long to get through the system, you still have to do what we kind of call it a mini IPO, a mini registration. You still have the government involved. Anytime you have the government involved, it takes a little bit of time. So it doesn't take 2 years, but it's probably going to take about 6 months. And so again, if you've got to close escrow in 3 months, 90 days or 60 days or whatever, you don't have 6 months to wait around for that. So it really helps. If you're a startup company and you're raising capital for your company, that might be something. But if you're a real estate investor with hard deadlines, it's a little bit hard to do the Reg A, which is again why 95% of people are using the Reg B.
Yeah. And if you do the Reg A, it's really for like if you're going to create a fund, like where you're not, the reason I love what we do now, Mauricio, is it's really about finding a specific deal and doing a specific private placement for that deal.
Yes.
And personally, I think it creates a way for you to not. The problem if you create a fund and you go raise, $30 million, you got to put $30 million to work, and you may not have a deal.
Right.
And if you don't, are you going to, because you have the money, compromise?
Right.
Right. Are you going to buy something you probably, and so I think sometimes the potential of judgment to get swayed is more prevalent.
And that's typically what happens. I mean,
that's Wall Street.
I hang out with a lot of smart people, and that's what typically happens in real estate. You get these huge funds, and typically they're pension funds, and they need to place that money. They've got the money, sitting there earning. They've got to put it to work, and so they're happy with 2 or 3% return sometimes because number one, the only way they get paid is on their management fees. But they need to place it. They can't just have it sitting there without anywhere to go. And these guys have a huge amount of money. So yeah, that's one of the issues. And then the other issue is when you have the money in the fund, it's not earning a return. What are you giving your investors? Are you just telling them, look, you're going to have no return potentially for 6 months while the money's in the thing? Or do you have to somehow create a return for them in the interim and give them a 4 or 5% while you're holding it, which, obviously that's another cost of your fund. So funds are great. So I don't want to knock the funds, but it is a completely different model. Just to be clear, you're raising the money without knowing what you're going to buy it with. And so from a passive investor standpoint, you're really betting on the jockey. In this case, I'm betting on Corey that he knows what he's doing, which obviously this one is a good one. But you're betting on Corey as opposed to the property because you don't know what the property is. What Corey does, most of the time what we do is we're identifying a property, we're getting it a contract. So now I can talk about the property itself. And as an investor, I can make my own assumptions. I can do my own due diligence on the property. Obviously, Corey's a big piece of that, and I've got to have trust and faith in Corey. But I can challenge Corey. I can be like, you've got this assumption. You're assuming, 2% rents, I'm going to assume 1% rents and see what the numbers look like. Or you're assuming you're going to get this increase and I'm going to assume a little bit more conservative. So you can mess with things. When a fund, you can't do any of that.
Right. Exactly. So, okay. So with that said, let's think about the timeline. Because we just did a podcast on timeline. It's called The Juice Was Worth the Squeeze.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the timelines of like, when do you get involved with, someone like Mauricio, a syndication attorney?
Yeah.
And I'll let you answer that question. When do you think, so if you're new, like you've never done a syndication and you don't have any idea what you're doing, what would that look like? And obviously you've got something built to handle because they're going to need a lot more hand-holding in the beginning than someone that's already done syndications and just looking to make a change with a good lawyer. Right? So
call me now. No, if you'd asked me this question about a month ago, I'll be totally transparent here. If you'd asked me a month ago, and I think this is the answer that most lawyers will give you, usually I would say, I get involved at the LOI stage is what I would usually tell you. Once you've identified a property, then we can have a discussion about the property itself. It may not be tied up, but we at least have a property package. We know approximately how much we're raising. We can start doing some damage at that point. If you don't have a property yet, we're just talking, hypothetical. So typically I would have said, call me when the LOI is done. But what I've noticed is a lot of people want help before that stage while they're still looking. So people want to have, for example, they want to set up their entities, which is a smart thing to do, right? They want to create their management company. They want to have business cards. They want to set up a website. all these pre-syndication things for a first time.
And they want, Mauricio to look over the website and say, hey, is this compliant?
Right. So a lot of the services that we provide in our, I'm going to call it the official engagement, would include things like a website review, right? I do a little video, and it's about a 4 or 5 minute video of your website, kind of going through page by page and just kind of pointing out things that I think, assuming you're relying on an exemption that doesn't allow advertising, that maybe is crossing the line and you should eliminate. Same with social media review. People are on social media, so I do a social media review. I'm an asset protection attorney as well, so I typically do asset protection services for my clients. So that's something some people want to do on the front end. A lot of people want to do it on the back end, but some people do. And then people want templates, for example. So I put together these sort of the best of the best, in my opinion, of what a really good template looks like for putting together your business plan. And I also, people want to pick my brain for a half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour, and before they shell out the big bucks for the PPM. So now I kind of say, if you want any of those services, then certainly reach out to your attorney or reach out to somebody even before the LOI, because there are things we can do if you're interested to get started beforehand.
Right. And I think that's a good point to make, because, the biggest for new people, and there's a lot of new investors coming into the marketplace. Yeah. And, they're listening to podcasts like mine, Michael Blanc's, Adam Adams, Rod Khleif. And a lot of those guys are really good podcasters, and we're giving out really good information.
Yep.
And we also, a lot of us have, education products, right? So, and right now the buzzword is, in my opinion, multifamily. And why is it? Because, we've been in a season of fix and flip for a long time, since the downturn, and it's getting actually harder and harder for them to find deals in the single family world, I believe. And really, even the ones that are super successful, they've been doing it for so long now that I think they're tired of the grind, of the consistency of having to hunt, where, the rental business, like when you get into, you've got over, 2,000 doors. I mean, life gets pretty good. Life gets pretty good. Where you have this wonderful word called cash flow.
Right.
And, cash flow moves mountains.
Right.
It's like, if you're watching on YouTube, look at my picture, my sunsets and palm trees picture in the back. That's what I think a lot of people want. And, but to get there, you have to have the right structure, documents, and even an entity structure. Right? Yeah. That's a big thing. Like, how are your partners control? Right. What happens if you die? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I was doing one today. I was reviewing prior deals, and, people are still, again, if you don't do asset protection, you don't really understand some of these things, but, people still combining, your operating companies, your management companies, all the sponsors, along with holding the asset in those companies, which is something you don't want to do. You want to always segregate the liability entities, which is your operating companies, from your asset holding companies. And people mix those together so that when there is a lawsuit, they have all these assets exposed when there's really no need for that. You could separate those assets away from the liability producing entities. So asset protection it's actually a bigger piece than I thought. It's because, like I said, I used to do asset protection. I don't do it anymore. I only do it for my syndication clients now. But it amazes me. Like, I think everybody needs an asset protection review. And so that's why, again, I think in my world, most people like to do it. They're so busy trying to close on the deal. They're like, let's just deal with it afterwards. So a lot of time we do it afterwards. But there are definitely people who are actively looking that would like to get that set up on the front end. So why not give it to them?
When you talk about asset protection, are you talking about like trusts and all that kind of stuff too, or is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. So when you say trust, I don't talk living trust, because you have a living trust, which is really an estate planning tool, which I think everybody needs to have a living trust. But that's just an estate, just avoids probate and makes it easy when you get hit by a bus, Corey, and everything.
Right. You're just talking about like when
entity formation. Yeah, I mean, we can do domestic, which is just entity formations, and where to set up the LLC. And we're in real estate, so it's primarily going to be LLCs. Multiple layers. Right. Yeah, if you want to get to a certain level, you can certainly. Because
that's what we do. I mean, like, so I think about like every deal that we've done, we've had a structure. Just what you just said is, we have multiple LLCs, right? Yeah. So we have. Yeah. And where I take my income is just I'm a shareholder. Yeah. I don't control anything as a shareholder. I just get the profits. Yeah. We elect a whole different LLC management company to run the business.
And we have I think mentioned it the last one. I forget what we did last time, but there's an article that I wrote called The 8 Critical Steps to Practicing Safe Syndications. And one of them has to do with setting up the entities. And so there's a nice little diagram there that kind of maps out.
Hey, where can they get that?
They can just email us. If they email us at team@premierlawgroup.net, team@premierlawgroup.net, just mention Corey, and then I'll have somebody email. It's nothing fancy. It'll just be a straight email back. But yeah, that's a good report. Gives you kind of the basics of what you should be looking, at least from the legal standpoint, right? I'll leave the other stuff up to the experts like you.
Right. So I totally agree. And if you don't have any asset or syndication attorney, you should take Mauricio up on what he just said. Like, have that call, set up a time, engage him, and get a pre-review. We'll call it like a pre-review to say, am I ready to kind of open up for business in raising capital? That's a really actually a great little thing there, Mauricio, because there's so many people that they're nervous as hell. They hear about, like, you can go to the Popo, or, and so that scares people, the bejesus out of people.
Right. Yeah.
And so what they really want to know is, from a legal standpoint, am I doing it right? Or am I set up correctly to start?
Yeah, so we can set up the entities to protect yourself, make sure that if things don't go south, that, again, the recession hits, and it may not even be your fault, most likely not your fault, that you've got not only your assets here, but your other assets protected. And then the other thing we can talk about, which we haven't really talked too much, is that people forget, and I think people get shied away because maybe the cost, but there's insurance out there too, and people kind of forget. And when I say insurance, I'm not talking property insurance. There's actually insurance, kind of like E&O insurance, where if you get sued by your investors for whatever reason, especially, again, if people are concerned about this, then there are insurance products out there that'll cover you, and there's specifics to these things, and you can spread that along. I mean, it's hard when you have one property, because then it all gets basically borne by that company. But if you have, like you have, let's say you have multiple deals, you can spread that premium over those 10 deals and pay for itself, and that way you've got an additional layer, because insurance is always your first layer of defense. You should always have insurance. The entity structuring is really your backstop. If for whatever reason insurance isn't enough, or there's a hole in it, or there's an exemption or whatever, you've got something to fall back on, which would be the entity setup.
Right. That's a good point. Because from my point of view, I call Mauricio when I'm under LOI, right? When I get a signed LOI, I'm just going to have an opening call and say, hey, Mauricio, got a deal potentially coming down the pipe. Yep. And I already know what he wants. So this is where I want to go with this. The rest of this time that we have is, from there, Mauricio's like, all right, give me a business plan. Send me your business plan.
Yep.
And we call it a marketing packet on our side, but he calls it business plan. Yep. Or a pitch deck, right? Yep. Is what a lot of people call it, pitch deck.
Yep.
And so it's create your pitch deck. Yep. And so once we're under a signed LOI, usually there's a 2 to 3 week window before you actually get a signed PSA, purchase and sale agreement.
Right.
That's when you should be really working hard on firming up your pitch deck, or your marketing packet, or your business plan.
Yep. Or executive summary.
or executive summary. Whatever it is that you're going to use to give to investors as your here's my deal.
Yep.
And then Mauricio is going, and this is what he does really well, is that helps him structure your private placement, and it gives you, so it allows you to start having the right conversations, because then from there, we say, okay, Corey, what are you wanting to do, right?
Yeah. So the first thing, and obviously you and I have been working so long together that by the time,
maybe I'm missing some steps here, so you fill in the color here, bro.
When you give me a business plan, we've worked together so long, it's in pretty good shape. But especially if it's a first person I've worked with, like, we spend a ton of time on that business plan. I think more than most people, and that's kind of one of the big value adds that I think I provide more than anybody else. We do a deep dive, and so I will underwrite your business plan. I'll go through that thing line by line. I'll have 1,000 questions, 1,000 comments. We'll get on the phone. We'll go through those. That's usually our first call. The one I did today was like over an hour long. And then you'll go home with.
God, you love me then, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah.
Now it's just like a couple comments.
Yeah. You then go back and you revise the business plan and you send it to us again, and we do the same thing. Now we only have 100 questions and 100. That's the only way I know how to understand your deal and then really extract all the risks and all the information that I need to extract in order to put it into the documents. A lot of people, this is what drives me nuts actually, a lot of these sort of discount firms or whatever that just kind of prepare PPMs. Like, they never talk to the clients. They may send them a questionnaire, and then suddenly, boom, they produce docs. And it's like, how do you know what to put in those docs? I mean, the purpose of the documents is to disclose all the material information to your investors, make sure you disclose all the risks. And each deal is different. I don't care if it's the exact same, not exact same, but if it's a building across the street from the last one you did, it's got its unique risk. It's a unique loan. I mean, you've got to analyze and underwrite that particular deal, and you've got to be able to put those informations in the PPM. So the only way I know to do that is basically pull it out of you. And through this process, going back and forth and asking you questions and revising and blah, 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 we finally get to what I call...
That's going to give you a better business plan, by the way, right? Yeah. It really is. It's going to make, because you're asking the questions like, hey, what does this mean? I need some clarification. Put a bullet point here. Is this money going to you? Who's this money going to? You're calling this income. So is it going to you? Is it to the sponsors? Is it to... And it's really about disclosure. It really is about disclosure and making it work.
Yep. And so once that's done, which may take, it depends on how quickly clients turn it around. So that timeline will sometimes, like you and I will probably get that thing done in a couple of days, but sometimes it takes a week or two because there's multiple revisions. But once that's done, that's when you can actually send that document to your prospects, to your potential investors. And that's when we start drafting all these legal docs, the PPM, et cetera. And we get those turned around in about a week. I actually like to commit to less than a week to get those drafts, because I don't want you waiting on the attorneys.
Right. While that's a good place to kind of just point out real quick is that once your business plan is, I call it certified by Mauricio.
I call it locked.
Right. Right. So once it's locked, that means it doesn't change, by the way.
Right.
And it becomes the Bible that you're going to operate from there on when you're out there pitching your deal. And so at that point, you can go share it, because now he's saying, hey, this is it. It's approved. It's locked. You can go out there and start talking and having conversations about it. Mauricio is then going to make the legal documents behind it. So it's a good way to start. Now you can start the people that you have a substantive relationship with and have filled out your accredited investor questionnaire, things like that. You can now start pitching this to those people and fielding interest. And it's a great way, because even if they say yes, we still don't even have the final docs yet, which is fine. And that's really, hey, listen, our docs are coming. And so it's a good way to get people to raise their hand.
Yep.
And I like to get people to raise their hand. That makes it so much easier. And by the way, when you're raising capital, you have to get double the amount of hands raised for the amount of money you're going to collect. So if you're raising $2 million, go get $4 million for the pledges.
Yeah. We were just talking about that with a couple other people, and some people even squeeze up to 3. So let's say like 2 to 3. So your experience too. Some people think it's 3. Yeah, because especially first time. Again, I'm speaking to sort of the
depends how many flakes you got, but we don't have flakes in our group.
For first-time syndicators, I think that's something that people underestimate, how long it takes to collect the monies, and that's they think they've got all the soft commitments, but again, that they're going to.
Someone says yes. Yes doesn't mean yes. Yes means no.
That doesn't mean cash in the bank. And then the other thing that people forget, just if you're taking IRA monies, for example, that they may have to convert it from their 401k or IRA. They got to go to a self-direct. That takes 2 or 3 weeks just to get that process done sometimes. So those things you'll just learn after doing the first couple.
Here's a good point. Let me ask you this question. When you close your deal, is your raise done? Does it have to be done on the day you close?
No, not necessarily, because you typically, as long as we're disclosing that on the front end, you can certainly close as soon as you're going to have enough money for the down payment and whatever you need to cover the close. But, you have your fees and other, maybe some reserves, and that's something that, you can wait a little bit longer to continue the raise.
So you can have some minimums, right?
It depends on how you structure it. I mean,
I'll tell you, like, we ask an attorney a question. It's all depends. Corey's going to give, I'm more like the dark side. I want to come in with like the Darth Vader here. I'll say, and from my point of view, is I think one of the easiest ways is I don't ever put myself in a corner. I do like minimums, right? I like to say I have to raise the minimum of this to get my deal done, and that's easier for me to say. Is I know it takes this much in order to affect my business plan. Anything less is going to I'm not going to be able to sufficiently run my project.
Right.
And then set a date like we just had this conversation. You don't know this probably with Jennifer, your assistant.
I know about it. I know everything.
Paralegal. Okay. So we set a date. I want to say like a year from the close date, just because we have arbitrarily maybe set a date. I'm like, okay, well, we'll just set it for a year past, because you never know. Like sometimes you can get into a deal and we'll have the minimum, but like you can back fund a deal. Maybe it takes another 3 months after you close to get like your acquisition fee, and maybe you've have a repair reserve that is pretty high. You over budgeted for your repairs just in case, right?
Yeah.
And so with those fees, because like we'll take $450,000 worth of fees on a $10 million close. Well, that's a lot of money. And maybe we have one deal, we have $1 million repair. So if I was to raise, $600,000 of that up front, so that together my fee plus another $4, that's $1 million. So I could probably set my minimum, $1 million less, because I can close and still affect my business plan and not worry it's not going to change it, and then still give myself some time to fund. And so that's the reality of what really happens a lot of times when we're syndicating. Now, I'd love to say the money always shows up and it like comes in like it's an overflowing bucket. Not my experience, right? Not yet. Every time I close deals, it's just like it's part of the process. You have to, and I think every syndicator, if they're truly honest, I guess there's some guys out there that they can turn on a switch and the bucket fills up. I've always had to make calls and I work, right? And that's just me, right? So that's my experience.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind, I am the wet blanket.
It gets easier. It gets easier though. Raising money does get easier.
It definitely does after you do the first. The first one's by far the hardest, right? But one thing to keep in mind is if you continue to raise after the close, just remember that you probably will, if you do it further down the road, you may have to start updating your documents, because your documents at some point will become stale. You may even at some point have financials now that you didn't have before, a quarter's worth of financials that you may have to now start providing the new people. And what we really need to be careful about is if those people are non-accredited, you may have to be providing them with audited financials. So there's just other issues that pop up. But can you do it? Absolutely. I would recommend not going too far after the close, because again, you don't want to have too much operations, because then you've got to start updating docs. But certainly if you want to close the property and then finish the raise in a couple weeks or a month or something, no problem.
Perfect. See, that's why I have Mauricio. I give my long version.
Talked about this in the
and he's like, no, make it a lot shorter, Corey.
I want to emphasize one thing that I like to emphasize is it's all about disclosures, right? So as long as we disclose everything on the front end, so the investors know what they're getting into, you can really structure it almost any way you like. As long as it's disclosed and people know what they're getting into, you're going to be fine. It's when you do a certain thing and then later on you change it or you do something you did not disclose, that's when you're going to get into trouble. So as long as it's disclosed what the game plan is, you're good.
That is the name of the game in the PPM world and syndication world, is disclosure, I think. Now, so with that said, so if we know, we've kind of established two rules of thumb for, when do you contact Mauricio? If you don't have an attorney, by the way, an SEC attorney, I highly recommend that you get in touch with Mauricio and his staff and his team. First of all, I think he's really good. I mean, this is all he does is this space. I'm giving you shameless plugs here, brother.
I'm gonna shut up for a little bit.
Because, man, like in this world, like, so it's a small world. It's the small world of who do you know, like, and trust. And I've come to really, I consider you my friend, Mauricio, and I like that what you do is, so when you're talking with attorneys, there are some attorneys who talk legalese. Well, for a better term, they can't talk English. They want to talk this high stuff that no one understands, because when you look at the documents, it's written in a different language. Okay? That's not how Corey barely made it out of high school. Corey needs to be able to talk with someone that can, like, talk normal. And I really want to just say, Mauricio has the ability to do both. He can talk legal, but he really has a way to communicate in a very normal way. And I think that's very special. And you don't see that very often. When you find it, when you find someone that you can have a real conversation, that's a real human being, that's a family man that lives life and works his butt off, those are the people that you want to surround yourself with. And that's what I've chosen to do. So that's my shameless plug for you, brother.
Keep going, Corey. Keep going. No, I appreciate it. And I used to apologize for it, but I come to realize that is one of the things I do well. And our dear friend, Tom Wheelwright, coined the term for me, which is, Mauricio is one of the few lawyers that actually speaks English. So, that's one of the things I try and do is educate clients and add value and educate them and try and not overcomplicate things and make it see. Now, I sometimes get into problems because everybody now thinks it's a simple and easy thing to do, which it's not. But I like to take the complex and make it simple.
Yeah, it really is. And you just got to have, and listen, Mauricio's not free, okay? Just so we understand this, right? You got to pay him. I pay him. To have time with Mauricio, it's not like he's going to pick up the phone and say, hey, let's go have lots of, I just want to precurse everybody that you pay for attorney. There's a yin to the yang, right? The reason we are good, we do good, clean business. I know that when I engage Mauricio, I have to pay him money. And that is our means of, we're friends regardless of money, but some people think that you work people for free forever. And I'm telling you, that's not the way to do good, clean business. When you want to get good, clean business, you pay for the services. You pay for someone to educate you. Whether, it's the same way of buying someone's course. You want to learn how to do apartments, right? If you really want legal advice on, hey, how do I keep myself, is my website clean, and all those things, you pay for that. And you feel better because of it, and you'll get a better service than if you don't pay for it. Let's put it that way. Because things that are free are not always great for you.
And the nice thing is, thank you. And the nice thing is that it does come out of the project. So you ultimately do get reimbursed from the project, which is a nice thing. But I think I'm pretty competitive. And
I know you are. I know you are. I want to make a plug, right? Because, I just know how it is, right? So, because, what does lawyers sell is time. It's really your time that's the most valuable. And for all of us, it's time, right? And because, listen, do I ever want to put a PPM together? Hell no.
Hell no for all of, thank goodness,
Yeah. It would be horrible at best. And so, I didn't spend all the time going to become an attorney, going through all the school. Mauricio did, right? And so that's really what, when it comes down to, we barter each other's services. He is a big part of my team, and it's something, and it's like, it's not even, I guess the best way I'm going to try to describe it is, when you have the right people on your team, and you don't need a lot of them, you need an attorney, you need a lender, and you need a management company and some other people. I'm not going to name them all, but it's as simple as, those are the ones you have in your cell phone, and it's like, hey, I've got a deal, we're going to do a deal. And then it's game on. We may not talk until the next deal. Now me and Mauricio see each other a lot in speaking engagements, but until we're back into like, hey, we got a deal, we may go for a while without talking. But that's normal. That's just the way it is. Because I got to be respectful of Mauricio's time, right? Because he works a lot, dude. This guy, I don't know if you guys have pay attention to social media, but Mauricio is an absolute animal. You're out there making huge waves, bro. I want to tell you, and you're really affecting the world out there by your education and letting people know all about syndication, what is good and what is not. And dude, for that, I think I'm thankful.
Oh, I appreciate that, and you may take those words back in a few months, because I'm going to be really upping the game there on the social media. So you'll be sick of me pretty soon.
Oh, dude, congratulations. So listen, for everybody listening, how would they get a hold of you, brother?
You know, if you want to, team@premierlawgroup.net. It's a great way to hold of me, team@premierlawgroup.net. I also started a YouTube channel not too long ago. There's only a few videos up there, but if you just go to YouTube and type my name in, you'll find a couple of educational videos. I'd love a subscribe to, again, it's
Mauricio
Rauld.
Rauld.
And I'll keep adding to that library and just trying to add value, as much value as I can.
Dude, that I believe that is the key, especially for all the new syndicators out there, is you've got to know the education piece. The education piece is huge. And so when you got someone like you putting out the really good, solid content that you absolutely need to know, that's where it's at. So, guys, check out Mauricio. Listen, if you're listening to this podcast and you enjoy it, hey, don't keep us a secret. Go out there and share it with the world. We're trying to really grow this thing. And by the way, if you have not yet, go to our podcast page, Multifamily Legacy Podcast. Ask questions. We're going to start answering when I do my own, not guest speakers, but when I have when I'm doing my own teaching segments. We'll bring up those questions that you leave, that you want to ask, that we'll answer live on the show. So guys, listen, the power of your mind is everything. It really is. The difference between winning and losing is what you believe in your mind, because if you believe it, you can achieve it, and your paradise is possible.